Hello, my friends. We meet again. Hold on. We have got a Edmonds Oast Brewing, and this is a sour blueberry mango. Because podcasting is a visual medium. Hold on, let me try this. Oh, it's good. It's very good. Uh, I'm here with Dylan Hager. Um, you you may not know him, but you know him, right? He is as front and center as I am, if not more, at every wrestling show. He is much like myself, a super fan on the independent scene and a hell of a guy. And just he's Dylan. I wanted to have this show to talk with someone in a similar boat as I am because I've spent the last better part of 10 years traveling this country, going to shows because I get the sense of fulfillment out of it. I get the sense of community. I get the sense of these are my people, and Dylan's in the exact same boat. Say hi, Dylan, by the way. I'm being
Hi,
rude.
I'm Dylan. What's up, Ben?
Hey, buddy. Um, so I wanted this show to kind of be in the mind of someone who devotes their free time and devotes their energy and heart and space and all of that sort of thing to not necessarily getting in the ring as an independent wrestler, but what it's like on our side of the aisle. The show's called Row One, Seat One. The only other person I know who sits, row one as much as I do is Dylan, and you just happen to be in the middle of the rows on camera
Yeah,
side, generally, right? Yeah,
yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Yeah,
So it's funny because we'll text each other when we see each other at shows and be like, dude, I see you in the green hat.
yeah, yeah, exactly. It's the green hat. Got to
Yeah.
watch for the green hat.
Gotta watch for the green hat. So Dylan, you are originally from the St. Louis area?
So I'm actually about 2-ish hours from St. Louis.
Okay,
I'm just in St. Louis constantly because we have a bunch of wrestling up there.
sure.
So it's people just assume fans, wrestlers, everybody. They just assume I live up there. I'm like, no, I actually got to drive 2 hours home after this.
Let's get autobiographical for a second here.
Sure.
I always tell people my first memory as a person was watching WrestleMania 3 with my father at my uncle Tommy's house because he was the one who got pay-per-view and we didn't. Where do you come into this picture? Was wrestling a formative part of your childhood? When did you fall in love?
Yeah, so I'm one of those that does not remember a time when I was not a wrestling fan.
Hmm.
I don't have the I walked in and saw Macho Man on TV and just fell in love with it. It's just been a constant whole life. Um, Without getting into too much detail, starting out, it was just me and my mom living with my grandparents, and I don't know if it was my grandpa that had it on, if my uncle had it on, or what the deal was as far as how I got started with it. But it quickly became a thing for me and my grandpa. After my mom married my stepdad, we moved out. I'd still go back to his house and just watch wrestling basically the whole time I was there. And got to a point. So I was born in '95, so not too long after that, we're like peak Attitude Era, which you can argue a 4-year old should not be watching Attitude
Fair,
Era
very
WWF,
very
and
fair.
no,
Yeah.
probably nobody should be watching like 2000s WCW.
Oh God, no.
So I
Except Kwee
technically,
Wee. Kwee Wee was awesome.
except Queeley, I technically was not allowed to watch wrestling, but that didn't stop my grandpa from keeping on my VHS tapes and letting me turn whatever I wanted on whenever I got to his house. So it would be like a go see the grandparents for the weekend, but also I'm gonna go sit at my grandpa's house and watch wrestling until 5 in the morning, and mainly WCW until it went out of business, and then it was mainly VHS tapes. And if I could catch something live, I'd catch it live, but that hardly ever happened.
So, what I'm hearing, and this might be a common theme with a lot of the listeners too. Wrestling for us was a thing to bond with your family over. My father
Yeah,
and I could be arguing, we could have the worst week, we could have whatever, but Monday night we were in front of that television, no matter what, flipping back and forth, during the Attitude Era, like you and your grandfather, what, just like that was the thing that we bonded over. That was what brought
hmm,
us together, and it sounds like it's the case for you
yeah,
as well.
yeah, yes. 'Cause I mentioned my uncle. He's a wrestling fan, still is a wrestling fan. So that's one of the many things we have in common. We'll just get together at his house to watch a pay-per-view and end up spending half the pay-per-view just talking about 80s Crockett or something like that. Halfway paying attention to the show. But it is very much a bonding when I think about my grandpa, I'm woo, mostly think about wrestling, and it wouldn't matter if it was an old VHS tape, something he was more familiar with, or if it was a at the time current day product. He'd still find something he would like about it, even if he didn't know most of what was going on as far as the modern day stuff goes. And yeah, it's he's passed now, but I wish so much I could just go back and even if it was just 30 minutes, just turn on wrestling and sit with him for another day and just enjoy it.
That's wonderful, and I think that a lot of people listening to this have that same sort of connection with whether it be, family or just someone you grew up as an influence, having as
Yeah,
an influence. So that's, like that's, we were led into this life. We weren't
yeah,
necessarily,
yeah,
it's nurture versus nature in a lot of cases. So,
yeah,
now one thing that I went through, and I'm pretty sure you being, you're a little younger than me, but wrestling wasn't very cool a lot of the time we were growing up. Um,
yeah,
were you? Because you said you never grew out of it. I never really grew out of it either. Were you the weird wrestling kid, in school? Were you? It was interesting for me because like the Attitude Era hit when I was in high school, so it became cool, and I didn't really know what to do with myself. Like, what do I, like I was just like, no, this is my underground thing, and now everyone likes it. What the hell, But like most of my childhood, wrestling was not cool.
yeah. So, like I said, I technically wasn't allowed to watch it,
Hmm.
technically. So, I knew enough to keep my mouth shut most of the time. But every now and then it would come up. Somebody might mention something, and you'd be like, "Oh, like Hulk Hogan rolls. I love Hulk Hogan." Maybe that's a bad example. But that's who most
Awkward.
people would, who most people 20 years ago
Yeah.
they would just say, "Oh, Hulk Hogan," and you would get the sense in my small circle that nobody else watched it. And then you would get invited to some random New Year's Eve party that your parents wanted to go to, and that person's kid would have it on their PS2, whatever SmackDown game, and it would kind of be like, "Oh, that's cool. You like wrestling? Kind of a little bit," and might play it for a little bit, but it really hit when I was in college. The network came out my spring semester freshman year,
Oh, brother.
so that wasted my whole college career. I was very much the non-cool kid that liked wrestling, and I still went out and did stuff. I didn't just sit in a dorm room and watch wrestling, but there was a lot of just sitting in the dorm room and watching wrestling. Different people would come in and be like, "What are you doing?" "Oh, I'm watching WrestleMania 2. No big deal. And then it did become "Oh, Dylan's got wrestling," and I'd be like, "Yeah, sorry guys, there's wrestling on."
Yeah. At what point, first of all, do you decide I'm just going to lean into this? And then second of all, I think you might have a similar experience that I had where we both work regular jobs. We're
Yeah,
we're part of non-wrestling social circles. But I am very much the wrestling guy
yeah,
to many people. And like, when everyone finds a funny wrestling meme, I'm the one they send it to. Or when everyone, hears about something, like, hey, did you hear about, yeah, no, that's, I'm aware of that. Yes.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and I'm sure a lot of people listening to this podcast too, they are the wrestling guy or lady
Hmm.
in their particular social circle, even if it's not necessarily wrestling affiliated. You have that experience too, I can imagine.
Oh yeah. A couple years ago, when Luigi Primo had his pizza dough wrestling thing going on, that was everywhere. I had 10 different people send it to me. Like, "Do you know this guy? Have you seen this guy?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, I've seen him a time or two." And it's very much the like you said. Anytime there's any type of wrestling meme, I have 10 different people sending it to me. And now it's at the point where it's like, "Do you know this guy? Are you friends with this guy?" And usually it's like, "No, I'm not."
Well, in a lot of cases, it's
Yeah.
yes, though. In a lot of
Well,
cases for both of us, it's like, yeah,
it's
I've met
the
him, he sucks, or like I've met him, actually,
yeah.
he's pretty cool.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
the stuff that goes viral isn't the cool stuff. It's
yeah,
the pizza stuff.
yeah,
Um,
exactly.
but as far as like when I really leaned into it, it it probably started in college. I didn't get deep into like the indie stuff until after college, just time wise and money wise. Um, but it very much so was a, "Oh yeah, that wrestling, that's a Dylan's thing." If anybody had a question or saw something pop up or heard it was going to be close to town or whatever, be like, oh, hey, Dylan, are you going to that? Or Dylan, did you see this? And usually it was, yeah, I did, or yeah, I am, or
Yeah.
but yeah,
So I guess kind of leads to you mentioned like we both started watching like more mainstream wrestling. You and
yeah.
WCW, me, WCW and WWF at the time. And um, at what point did you start to spread the spider web out a little bit and go a little deeper? For me, I fell out of wrestling for a little while, and then for whatever reason, I just started getting nostalgic and like found some podcasts, and that turned me on to like mid 2000s Ring of Honor, and then it's been all that was 20 years ago, and it's been all obsession
Yeah.
downhill since then, basically. At what point did you say, let's see if there's stuff past what's on TV?
So I was at a point where basically everything I watched was on a DVD or a VHS. And even as great as that stuff is, you can only watch it so many times before it's like, okay, I've seen this.
Hmm.
And
And
it
play
was
the notes.
exactly, yeah, it was probably 07, 08 ish. My uncle told me about TNA. And Sting's my favorite wrestler. So
Hmm.
Sting was there, Christian was there, Angle was there. Like the top tier was all old WCW or WWF guys, plus like AJ and Joe. And so they would show a replay on Spike late on Saturday night. So I was at my grandparents' house one Saturday late and turned it on. I was like, this rules. This is so cool. And so for a couple years, it was WWE and TNA. And then during Kevin Steen's Ring of Honor title reign, my uncle again said, hey, there's this small company that airs on a local Fox channel multiple times during the weekend because it's a syndicated deal. If you have a chance, check it out.
Oh, you got the
So,
syndicated TV. Oh,
oh yeah,
that's
yeah. I'm
that's very
later.
cool.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm past all the Joe and Punk and Nigel
Hmm.
and that cool stuff. I'm Kevin Steen and Briscoes and Jay Lethal, and turned it on, and it was so much different than what WWE or TNA was doing at the time. And here again, I just thought it was the greatest thing ever, and fell in love with Kevin Steen. And this was right after Generico went to WWE, but it
Yeah.
was Kevin Steen, like I said, the Briscoes, um, Scum, Steve Carino.
I'm not a
That's
scum in
yeah,
forever.
yeah. That's what got me into Ring of Honor,
Hmm.
and from then, because they would show their TV syndicated, but then like a week later or something, it would be on their website. So I was usually like a week behind, but I'd watch it on their website and then just stuck with it up through now. And slowly but surely, started adding a Lucha Underground or hear about this thing called PWG and buy a DVD of it to see what it is and just keep falling down the rabbit hole one step at a time.
So there's this divide among people where the old heads, I'll call us, were so dependent on physical media for the longest time. And I think
Yeah,
the network was what really, the network and really like the the internet obviously was around, but it hadn't really mastered streaming and the video thing and all that until probably the last 7 to 10 years. You figure, right?
yeah,
Um, and so physical media. I mean, I mean, the DVDR guys and Pete and all them. Like, I was thinking about Pete because, like, or Zellner. Zellner has so much physical media that it's just insane. And I mean, he's been streaming over to like, streaming and stuff like that. But like, it's there was that divide between like the people who like were the tape traders and the DVD
yeah,
collectors and things like that, and then like now it's just at the tip of your fingers. And I kind of, as an old person, want to be like, you don't know how bad we used to have it.
yeah. I still prefer the physical media.
Hmm.
Like if I have the DVD of it and I want to watch something old, I'll watch it on the DVD instead of
Sure.
pulling it up on Peacock. And it kind of scared me a little bit when the network switched to Peacock, and there was a couple months of a down period where not everything
Yes.
was on there. And I got used to having every Nitro and Thunder and Raw at my disposal. Then all of a sudden, it wasn't there, and I was like, wait, I definitely don't need to get rid of all my stuff for sure.
Yeah.
And I need to keep buying stuff when I can find it, which isn't often. But like during that time, I bought bootleg copies of all the ECW pay-per-views, and they are recorded from the actual pay-per-view stream, so it has
Nice. Oh, nice. Yeah,
the actual
non-censored. Yeah.
audio, yeah,
Yeah.
not the Peacock dubs.
Which,
So,
especially in ECW, makes all the difference in
oh
the world
yes,
because the music is such an integral part of ECW, and when you're
yeah,
throwing in that Muzak, like elevated music,
yeah,
for fucking New Jack or Sandman or Shane Douglas, I mean, like that makes so
yeah,
much of it for
yeah.
those guys, you know?
It's a
Yeah.
completely different show. Yeah.
Mhm. Um, so we're we're digesting wrestling through our childhood, but I was a little late to the game as far as attending shows. We just never had any money growing up, and I've told the story. I didn't really first go to my first wrestling show until I was in my mid 20s. It was at Ring of Honor in the mid 2000s. Um, were you able to go to shows as a kid, or when did you catch the bug as far as like this is a better live experience?
Um, I was probably a teenager before the first show I actually remember going to. I know my mom and my uncle took me to a show I might have been to,
Hmm.
um, and I just remember getting a toy title belt, and that's about it. I think Owen Hart and Stone Cold was on the show,
Oh wow,
not against each other, but I just remember us leaving the show going, and that's the bottom line because Dylan said so. So I feel like Stone Cold had to be on the show for that sort
sure.
of thing, but I don't actively remember that really. But they were my parents were because after I got probably 12ish or so, they knew I was watching wrestling and was kind of just a don't watch it in front of your siblings because we don't want people getting hurt type thing. So they knew I watched it by that point. And when they would come, the nearest big town to me is Poplar Bluff, and we have a arena here. And so we get a house show every couple years usually, and I got to go to several of those.
Hmm.
Um, it came when I was in high school, and it was probably the worst show I've ever been to, as far as a house show type thing. But I remember it stood out to me because they advertised it on the local TV.
Yeah.
SmackDown was on UPN or CW or something like that, and it was Poplar Bluff, get ready, we're coming to your town. And one of the advertised matches was Triple H versus Vladimir Kozlov.
Oh good lord. Oof.
Okay, so
Oof.
we are. I remember my grandpa and I was at a concession stand. I don't remember if it was during intermission or right before, and I hear Kozlov's music hit, and he was like, "Do you know who that is?" I was like, yeah, it's one of the matches I really wanted to see, one of the matches they were advertising. So he was like, okay, let's go back to our seat. We'll get out of the line. Triple H doesn't work Poplar Bluff, Missouri. So after Vladimir Kozlov was in the ring, it wasn't Triple H that came out. It was Hurricane Helms. Now, which I love Hurricane.
A nice
And
guy, by the way. Hell of a wrestler.
now,
Yeah.
yeah, now it would be a completely different
Hmm.
story. I'd be psyched. But at the time, I'm here to watch Triple H in a street fight versus Vladimir Kozlov. So when Hurricane comes out, I was like, wait, what is this? Why is he here? And my uncle was there with us, and he was like, well, some of the bigger names don't always work the smaller shows. And I was
Well,
like,
the
okay,
first
I
time
guess
you
that
had the
makes
rug pulled
sense.
out from under you, it's a
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
Certainly a
And
moment.
I was waiting to see Undertaker and Triple H, and he was like, yeah, Undertaker's probably not going to be here either. And so I did a couple of those in the Bluff, and then after I went to college, there was a bigger town nearby that they'd come probably once a year. I drove down to a couple of those, and then actually, I didn't start doing indie shows till after COVID, just the way everything timed out.
Interesting. Yeah, because you're. Oh, I figure you've been doing it longer because I feel like I've known you forever. But it's
Feels that
just
way.
well, COVID was the thing. Like, I mean, that
Yeah,
was like, that like there's a moment in time there where like, BC and AD basically like pre-COVID
yeah,
and after
yeah,
COVID, but like, then again, some of us old heads were around before COVID and remember the long, long ago. And it's interesting because you've kind of picked up the travel thing as I've slowed down. You're like, I used to be, I had a car and it had about 150,000 miles on it at the time, and I figured 100 of those were wrestling miles because I
sure.
worked from home at the
Yeah,
time. And I had 150,000 freaking miles on it. Um, so yeah, it was. I mean, and you're doing that now, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But um, I guess my next question is, I always get the question because like I said, we're the wrestling guy. Um, Why did you never choose to wrestle? What stopped you from crossing the barrier?
So I grew up in a very small town, and something I've realized, I think, in the last couple of years is, people always say, "Oh, you can do whatever you want, dream big," but that, it was the case, but it wasn't the case there. Like, it never really seemed like an actual option. You didn't know where to go train. You would hear different stuff, mainly from watching documentaries or reading books or whatever. Oh, I trained at the Hart Brothers, or what have you. But there was nothing close to where I lived, and as far as I know, not anything major in St. Louis at that time. And
Hmm.
I'm sure there was a place to train, but not something that
Reputable.
somebody only watching
Hmm.
WWE and TNA would have heard about. Um, and I'm also, especially growing up, was very small, athletic, but no muscle build, no nothing, just super scrawny. So that I knew I didn't have the body for it,
Yeah.
the build for it. And now I look back and it's like I could, if I wanted to, put in the effort and put on some size and not be the worst person at a lot of shows. Um,
Very true.
but I'm at a point now where I don't want to do the actual training. There's probably some laziness in it. But the actual training I wouldn't want to do. I think I like the kind of the behind the scenes, kind of just being a fan, just being there for everything better than the I'm stressing out over this booking or I have to, rely on other people to pay my bills, have to make sure I'm booked in the right spot and all that kind of stuff.
What
Uh,
I always say is, this is my, you can probably, we've had this discussion, you can probably relate to it. This is my escape. This is
yeah,
my go away from the realities of the real world. This is my thing that does not cause me stress. And there are very few of those.
yeah,
Um, but this is my thing that I do not derive stress from. If it felt like a job or a source of stress or something that was physically taxing me or mentally taxing me, then it is not serving the purpose which I need it to serve. And because of that, I don't want to train. I don't ever want to cross the barrier because I don't want it to lose that um, sense of other, because we all have so much real world bullshit that I'm a big believer. For me, it's wrestling. For anyone listening to this, it could be something else, but like some place where you can go and you just worry about you're not going to worry about your latest sale or your latest thing or your money or whatever. It's just like this is I'm gonna come here and it's kind of a moment of zen, right? It's just like
yeah.
I'm gonna get away for a little while and escape the bullshit of reality and go to this place. And for that, wrestling's always been that for me. I think it's the same for you. We've had this conversation before.
Yeah, it to a certain extent, it's as relaxing as sitting in a metal folding chair
Fair, yeah,
surrounded by people that don't wear deodorant can be.
yes,
Um,
true.
it's a lot of that. There is a part of me that would like to make all the wrestling BS my normal life BS. Like if I could get rid of the normal 9 to 5 job and have to worry about all that stuff, and instead worry about wrestling, part of me thinks that would sound cool, but so much of it, I agree with what you just said, and it's okay. When I leave my job and I head off to St. Louis to go to a wrestling show, I'm not worried about the actual work part of it, or have I promoted enough, or whatever my job would fall in that wrestling
Hmm.
line. I'm not worried about that. I'm just going up to enjoy myself, and there, there's definitely a lot to that of
Yeah,
just like you said, an escape, get away
yeah.
from everything, just go.
There's value in it. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, I would say that's why I didn't wrestle. Also, I'm big and fat and a fragile flower and have two $5,000 pieces of machinery attached to me at all times. So
yeah,
not particular for me. Let's talk about your tastes kind of evolving over time as you started to discover independent wrestling. Like the wrestling I liked when I was 6, when I liked the Ultimate Warrior. I don't know.
yeah,
Is very different than now when I hear classical music in the Daniel Makabe match, like slightly different. Um, how do you feel like your tastes evolve over time? Are you embarrassed of the taste you had when you were younger, or do you think it was all kind of part of a natural progression?
I think the easy way to put it would just be Daniel Makabe is my favorite wrestling style.
Same.
You could just leave it at that.
Hmm.
But it's funny. I think about this often. If you turn on just Royal Rumble 1990 just to pull a random pay per view,
Yeah.
the matches on that show are going to be so different than what you see today anywhere, indies or on TV. And you like nostalgia is a very powerful drug. You can watch a Hulk Hogan Ultimate Warrior match, since we keep coming back to those two guys, and watch them do the bear hug and test his strength, and you can allow yourself to fall back into, oh my gosh, this is so
Hmm.
awesome, and then turn on an indie show where there's six people doing dives on each other nonstop, and also go, wow, this is so awesome.
Yeah.
And I don't know that there is a certain style I call my favorite. If I had to lean to one, I mentioned Makabe, it would be that um, very technical mixed with good striking, like a Makabe, a Kyle O'Reilly, a Brian Danielson, something like that. But the way I put it, just good wrestling is good wrestling, and bad wrestling is bad wrestling. It doesn't matter if it's death match or a brawling style or the super flippy stuff or what have you. If it's good, it's good, and if
Yeah.
it's not, it's not.
Yeah.
and
There's
it can,
bad
yeah,
in every genre. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I do love a good old fashioned brawl, a Derek Neal, a Manders match. But if you told me I could only pick one style, it would be the more technical wrestling, some striking mixed in there. Makabe Ku is a great example.
Yes.
Something like that.
Let's talk about our favorite matches we've seen live because I did my math and I've told people this. I've probably in the last 10 years done between 500 and 600 shows, which is moderately embarrassing and also a sense of
Yeah,
pride. Um,
yeah, I
you're
feel that.
in the last 5 years, you're probably up there, probably well above me because you're you know every weekend you're somewhere, and what have been we'll talk about the travel here in a minute. B, what are the biggest highlights you've had, like those that top three matches you've seen live that like you had to be there in the crowd?
Um, I'm going to keep this kind of indie specific
Hmm.
with an
I understand.
honorable mention to. I was in St. Louis for the AEW pay per view that had Osprey and Bryan,
Hmm.
and
Oh,
that
cool.
was just insane.
Hmm.
Um, but because you also mentioned like the kind of you have to be there moment, you don't have to be there for Brian Osprey. It's going to be good no matter what.
Hmm.
Um, I really struggle with this because when I do see so much, and what hits to me for a different reason, and it might hit to you just because of the atmosphere and the
Yeah.
wrestlers and that all that kind of stuff. One of them I always go back to was earlier this year. Speedball was in town for a Grandel wrestling show against Gary J.
Oh, cool.
And Speedball doesn't have bad matches, and Gary doesn't have bad matches. And even though it was kind of a smaller crowd, and Speedball is on TNA and GCW and what have you, um, he didn't hold anything back. And Gary's not going to hold anything back,
Mm.
and they just beat the shit out of each other. And it was one of those where you stand up and clap like during the match because it's so good. That would definitely be up there. Um, Davey Vega and Billy Starks had a
Mhm.
match at Anarchy, probably two years ago, maybe 3 years ago, um, and it was a tournament match they were doing, so it wasn't super long, but they just had great chemistry. And here again, it's Vega and Billy, so it's
Yeah,
going to be a good
they know what they're
match.
doing. Yeah.
Yeah, it stands out. And 3 years ago, my first SCI, Makabe and Domgrini had a unannounced non-tournament match
That's awesome.
last night of the tournament, I believe. I think it was night
Hmm.
two. It had to be. They were both in the tournament. So yeah, night two non-tournament match, very technical, just a pro wrestling match. That and everything that weekend, everything Makabe and Ku and Dom did, singles, tag, whatever, everything just hit different that weekend. And but the Makabe Dom match was one of my favorites.
So I was thinking about this on the way here. My top three have all been on Mania trips. Um, it was the time I discovered Makabe wrestling Fred Yehi in Philadelphia. It was really fucking good, man. It was in some like little like VFW hall,
Yeah.
and it was the first pizza party show actually.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was they had that was out of this world. It was so very good, and it was the time I discovered. I'm just like, okay, we're all in. Um, saw Janela and Walter in New Orleans. I was at that match. No, not Janela. Sorry, not Janela and Walter. PCO Walter. PCO Walter.
Oh man.
I was at that match. Yeah.
Yeah.
I still hear the cannon noises of those chops in my head 10 years later. Um, though that was the most disgusting match I've ever seen in my life, and no one technically bled, although PCO's chest looked like hamburger.
Yeah.
After it was a Janela Spring Break. It was a Janela Spring Break in New Orleans a few years ago. And the last one was this year. It was Mad Dog Connolly and Demus.
Oh.
It was
Yeah.
disgusting. It was
Yeah.
absolutely gross. Because here's the thing: you and I are in the position where we've seen so much wrestling, and people listening to this may relate to it, that we've seen so much wrestling that it's getting harder and harder to buy in and suspend disbelief
Hmm. Yeah.
and like not be snarky about it, and like I don't know, like maybe it's just me, but like that level of snark is definitely there, and like
Yeah.
the been there, done that feeling and all that sort of stuff, and it's hard to find anything new. Um, and definitely a sense of like that match had a sense of danger that never before, never since have I felt that level of like, oh, this
Yeah.
is a legitimate thing. I'm in danger. They're throwing things all around the building. A woman in the crowd actually broke her toe, so like we were in danger. Um, there was just so much blood, and it was a dog collar
Yeah.
involved, and it was just like it was gross, but like it was that like that raw, gritty punk rock, like
Hmm.
like grassroots, like this is it, its like purest form of violence. It was just sheer take no prisoners, um, unadulterated fucking, you know, devil may care violence that just like I've never seen, and it
Yeah.
was funny to see like the people who were responsible were freaking out because they
Yeah.
had to actually like be
Yeah.
responsible, and I'm just there like, no, just let it wash over me, man.
Yeah.
Like it
That
was so
show, I had the worst case of FOMO because just for one, it's an action show on Mania weekend, and I haven't done a Mania weekend yet because I use my vacation time scattered throughout the year going to
for other
shows
wrestling,
instead
yeah.
of one week in
Mhm,
April, and I could see you, I think Kaya and I think Val were all at that show,
mhm.
and I could see you all in the background of different matches, and I could see Matt Griffin running around. And so before we even got to that match, I was like, man, I wish I was there instead of sitting on my couch. And then that match happened, and that was the Thatcher Makabe,
Mhm.
and both of those, I was like, man, I wish I was there. I'm
You're
missing
coming.
out.
You're coming to Mania with me one year. It's an amazing experience. But there's so many matches I watch. You're in the crowd, and I'm like I get a sense of FOMO
Yeah,
watching you. So like between the two of us, we've got most of it
yeah,
covered.
yeah,
Um, but so let's go into the why, right? Like why do we do what we do? Because like there's a difference between most of the people listening to this show will go to an occasional wrestling show here and there, and may have discovered a local indie or something like that. But the reason I want to have you on and kind of parallel my experience is because, and I don't think I'm speaking out of school here, we're the hardcores of the hardcore, and we're the ones getting in the car every week. And me especially, more before COVID, I was doing this even more. Now I do it a little bit, but not as much. Um, you're a fucking road warrior, and you are in the car every weekend going to some sort of prominent wrestling show, whether it be GCW or ICW, or like, I mean, local shows in the Midwest. I mean, you're always finding something, and it's generally good.
yeah.
um why do you do what you do?
Man, I wish I knew. I wish I knew. Um, cause like you said, I get asked that a lot. It's one of those like I don't go around just talking about it. like at work. I'm not like, oh, hey, I'm driving to Chicago this weekend. But every now and then it'll slip out, and they'll be like, wait, you were where this weekend? You're already back? Why? And it's like, yeah, I just have fun doing it. And really, that's like the baseline is I just have fun doing it. But it's also at a point where I was just talking about this a week or two ago. Most of my friends that I talk to on a regular basis are either pro wrestlers or wrestling fans at this point.
Oh, I my joke
And
is most of my friends wear
yeah,
spandex.
yeah, oh yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And you know, to see them, whether it's fans or wrestlers, you have to put in the miles to go see them, pretty much. And not that I drive 6 hours just to talk to somebody for 15 minutes at a merch table, uh, but that's kind of the atmosphere, the community of it. Um,
It's our tribe.
yeah, exactly,
It's our tribe. And
exactly.
and yeah, this is like we're very similar in this regard in that like wrestling for you and me and the reason that I devote so much travel and time and energy and thought and um social energy
Hmm.
specifically into it is because of it's 50% the actual wrestling, what happens in the
Yeah,
ring, but it may even be 51%. Now I think about it, the social aspect of it.
yeah,
These are, and if anyone listening to this kind of thinking about diving into independent wrestling, you're going to enjoy the stuff that happens in the ring. But the thing that I really love about independent wrestling is that you actually get to build relationships with
yeah,
the wrestlers and the fans and the people involved and the announcers and the this and that and the other thing. Like it is so accessible, and
yeah.
everyone is so accessible. They're real people. They are. There's not a distance. There's not a no one kind of there's kayfabe is dead. They're not gonna
Oh,
like
yeah,
um. But if you make the time to invest in these people, they will they'll be your friends for life, and they'll be
yeah.
the people you have a relationship with for life. And one of the reasons why I have this podcast is because some of these people are the most fascinating people outside of the ring that you've ever
Hmm.
met. And everyone, they all have a story and they all have something interesting about them that doesn't necessarily have to do with wrestling. Sometimes it does, but it's these people from all walks of life. It's such a diverse crowd, especially
Oh yeah,
who gather around this one thing that we all consider a form of art. And that's where we meet. But the paths that everyone takes to get there um, are very different and really cool
yeah,
because of that.
yeah. And like you said, the wrestling is definitely a part of it.
Mhm.
Because I'm not getting in my car and driving to Chattanooga just to eat with you at the City Cafe. No
Hey, hey,
offense,
hey,
but
it's fine. It's fine. Yeah, no, no.
um, but it's just take SCI for an example, and maybe it's extreme because it's a whole weekend. It's not just a show. But when I go to SCI, I know I'm going to go to TWE on Thursday. I'm going to go to SCI Night One on Friday. I'm going to do two shows on Saturday, and I'm going to see some incredible professional wrestling. And I'm going to get to see like 10 or so, maybe more, of my friends that I don't usually get to
Mhm.
see. It's like just in Chattanooga. And I grew up very shy, like not a social person at all. And every now and then it had just hit me that like I've got a handful of friends in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and a handful of friends in Chicago, and I got friends up in Iowa, and I'm friends with a guy in Philly, and it's all because we've crossed paths at wrestling shows
Yeah,
and just connected over wrestling.
yeah.
You
It's
know,
it's a unifier.
yeah,
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 it's. I mean, I'm a pretty social guy. I'm
yeah.
just
You are,
wired. I'm a
you are.
pretty social guy. I'm wired a little social. But honestly, I like the fact, like you just said, you know, and you shouldn't sell yourself short. I can walk into a building in Atlanta or Nashville or St. Louis or Chicago or Boston or Philly or wherever, and I'll know 10 people. Chances are,
Yeah,
and there'll be 10 amazing people, that I've been able to build this relationship with through this wild ass world of wrestling, and I think that's really cool. Like
yeah,
I love the fact that like you you the hose and different area codes thing, right? Like
yeah,
no, but
yeah,
seriously, like it's just through if anyone's considering diving in a little bit more, from their local indie, and hey, maybe I'll drive 2 3 hours of the show. Maybe I'll, go a destination show like a WrestleMania or an SCI, or a weekend or something like that. Like the the wrestling is going to be great, but you're going to make some lifelong relationships among kindred spirits at something like that.
hmm And you kind of mentioned it earlier. Like we have both seen so much wrestling
Mhm.
that it's like I'm not going to go somewhere if there's bad wrestling.
Oh,
So
I
it's
will.
it's it's got to be okay. I should rephrase that. I'm not going to drive very far to see bad
Yeah,
wrestling. If it's
yeah, that's
close,
fair.
I might go, but I'm not going to drive 6 hours to see a
Fair.
bad
Yeah,
wrestling
yeah,
show
yeah.
just because I got some friends there. So it is cool to know, like, oh, I can go to a Dreamwave show 5.5 hours away, and it's going to be awesome wrestling, and there's going to be people I know in the crowd I can talk to. I can go to St. Louis, it's 2 hours away, and there's going to be great wrestling. And I can go to Chattanooga, and there's going to be great wrestling. And it's not like is it worth my time? Am I going to regret going if I do? Is it
I've
just,
had that thought many times.
oh, yeah, yeah. Uh,
Is
but
the
after
juice worth
you've
the
been there,
squeeze, right?
yeah, yeah. But and same thing with some of the wrestlers. It's like, I'm not one of the people that if I take a selfie with a wrestler, we're best friends. There's people I know that think like that. So it's the very few that you do actually form that relationship with,
Mhm.
and they're your friend, not just trying to make $20 off a t-shirt sales to you. Um, those are some of the coolest ones. Like if you told little kid Dylan that he was actually friends with pro wrestlers, even if it was just on an indie level, not main eventing WrestleMania, I wouldn't have believed you. That seems so out of the realm of possibility. And so those are always special also, where it's like, yeah, they're a wrestler and we're actually friends and I can talk to them about life, not just, hey, that was a great arm drag.
You mentioned something a little bit earlier. You said you were shy, which is funny because I've
Yeah.
known you for a while, and I mean, we get along famously since day
Yeah.
one, and now you're doing a podcast that's video and audio.
Yeah.
Um, do you think being involved in wrestling has helped you develop as a social person?
Yes.
Hmm.
I think
Like your
part
social
of it
skills?
is a lot of the shows I go to by myself. So your choices are either sit there and not talk to anybody and just sit there quietly, or make friends with people and enjoy yourself and have a good time. And the first SCI I went to, I really didn't do a whole bunch. And I went to the wrestling shows, but I didn't go out and eat with anybody after the shows or nothing like that. I just went back to the city cafe, basically, or Taco Bell, and ate by myself. And it's just such a night and day difference when you actually have people to go hang out with and go do stuff with. Um, it just opens up so much more you can do. It's not just I'm going to go sit in my hotel room and then I'm going to go watch the wrestling. Then I'm going to go back to my hotel room. So
Becomes a hang, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yeah,
Hmm.
it definitely has. And I probably am more social, more at ease at a wrestling show, talking to whether it's fans or wrestlers or what have you, than I am anyplace else. It's like I go to place else, it's like I don't like people. I don't want to talk to people. I'm just going to get in and out here as quick as possible. And I go to a wrestling show and I'm there an hour after the showing, still talking to people.
Um, there's a I've thought about this especially recently. Um, Given how plugged in we are, and are there moments for you where you kind of wish the Pandora's box wasn't as open as it is to people like us? Like I know too much, right?
Yeah, yeah. Every now and then,
Hmm.
I always think back and it's like, what if I was watching the show with kayfabe still being real?
Hmm.
Like not worried about, oh, well, this is going to happen because of storyline reasons. They need to go here, or especially on an indie level, not knowing. Well, so and so already told me he's working X at the next
Hmm.
show, so I know he's going to win this match. Um, yes and no, because there's
Hmm.
also a whole different way of looking at it when it's like where they're going, because that's where they told you they're going,
Hmm.
and you're just going to see how they get there.
Yeah.
It's a whole different way of watching it. Sometimes I wish it wasn't that way. Sometimes I love that it is that way. It just it's very kind of situational. But I try not to when I'm talking to people. I don't go up to them and be like, "Are you winning tonight? What are you doing next month?" It's I still want to watch it
Yeah.
from a fan's perspective. Like I don't want to know for sure what's going on.
I
Usually,
specifically asked not to be spoiled,
yeah, exactly.
on stuff because like there are so few moments, right, where
Yeah,
you like can actually like, especially given how in deep we've gotten and stuff, like you have to kind of boundaries, I guess is the
yeah,
word, right? Like you have
yeah,
to kind of understand the boundaries of like I need to still make this thing enjoyable, even though I'm in as deep as I am and know people in the personal way that I do.
yeah,
And it's hard to straddle that line sometimes.
yeah. Oh yeah,
So that's if anyone's looking to get this in deep, to just kind of know your sense of boundaries and know where you want to still keep those moments of suspension of disbelief and where you just want to go in further. So that would be my advice there. Um, I mean, I'm here in Chattanooga. Obviously, I know what my scene, I guess is the word, is like. Um, you're in a very special place in that you're in the Midwest. And I see you most often at St. Louis area shows.
yeah.
How is and you traveled everywhere. How is the scene there and the wrestling culture there different than other places in the country, or is it similar everywhere? What makes St. Louis special?
Uh, First off, Chattanooga might be my favorite non-St. Louis place.
Oh,
Just throwing it out there,
honey.
wrestling wise. But St. Louis, I think it's really the talent because there is just a ton of very talented wrestlers,
Hmm.
either in St. Louis or close enough around the city that they can come in often. And we've got, depending on what you want to call a major indie, um, three or four fairly successful
Hmm.
indies. And of course, they have some crossover talent wise, but it's not the exact same roster at every show. We're getting to a point now where it's like the crossover is very little, which I love to
Hmm.
see. Because if
You're
I'm
very
gonna,
blessed in that
yeah,
regard. Yeah.
if I'm gonna go that far, I don't want to see the exact same matches every time. And there's enough. There's probably three I go to pretty consistently, and then one of the shows they only run like twice a year, so I go to them, but I don't call that like a consistent
Hmm.
indie. And they're all different, um, a different feel, different vibe. Um, like just an example, Anarchy is amazing. St. Louis Anarchy, very hard hitting. They take time to tell their stories. It's got a great atmosphere. And then WrestleMax, KOD's promotion, more recently they've kind of been using a bunch of the younger talent mixed in with a Davey Vega, Shaza McKenzie, KOD. These people that know what they're doing,
Hmm.
and it's cool to get to see some of the younger talent
Guided up.
get a more like a
Hmm.
more focused storyline, get
Hmm.
pushed a little harder. Um, and it's still a great atmosphere, and it's still great wrestling, but it's got a completely different feel from a Anarchy or a Glory Pro.
It's awesome. I mean, like yeah, you're very blessed to have a diversity
Yeah.
of wrestling within your city. And then I think that people who are listening to this, I mean, it starts at home, right? I mean, if you're you don't even necessarily have to be near a major city. I'm in Chattanooga, Tennessee, which is, you know, it's a nice, great place to live, but there just happens to be a good wrestling scene here. But honestly, what I've learned is that, no matter where you are, within an hour or two drive, there was probably a wrestling show going on Friday, Saturday night. And then you find
Yeah.
it, and you find talent you're interested in, and you find out where else they work, or you find other
Yeah.
promotions, and it just like the snowball rolls down the
Oh yeah.
hill.
Yeah.
And then because we both started, "Oh, let me test this out. Let me dip my toe here. Let me dip my toe there." And I guess
Hmm.
the other thing I would say is don't be afraid to try something new.
Yeah.
Um, even if it seems, if GCW is in your area, it seems like a really big indie, but like, it has a lot of, small indie show feel, and just the
Hmm.
talents,
Yeah.
huge. But then like your local indie, try them out. You got someone an hour away, try them out. It just, you don't know until you try,
Yeah.
and you might end up having a good time.
Yeah. And you don't have to, keep going back to it. If
Hmm.
you try and it's not for you, there's so many other options
Hmm.
that you don't have to be like, oh, I guess I'm stuck going here now. It's there's plenty, even if it's not in your area, there's plenty to watch,
Yeah.
more than enough to watch. And kind of like you said, it is just a snowball. And sometimes I don't know if I love it because it's, um, oh, I know this nucleus of wrestlers, they all work 2 hours up the road every other week. Now I'm going 2 hours up the road and I'm exposed to more people. And now all of a sudden I'm driving 6 hours. And it's, yeah, I do love it, but
Your
it is
car hates
funny.
it though. Yeah.
My car hates it. My car hates it. But it is very much exactly how you put it. It's you go to one show, you fall in love with these wrestlers. Oh, they're working here. Now I'm going to go try this place out. Oh, this place is awesome too. And it just keeps expanding.
Yeah. And but it's a wonderful snowball, honestly, because you
Yeah,
just, you know, so I guess my last question on this tip before I want to get off a completely different subject before we go, um, would you recommend this, Mosley calls this podcast, this thing of ours, to others? What benefits and what detriments do you have?
it's really just dependent on the person.
Hmm.
Um, because there is, depending on how hard you want to go with it, um, there's a lot.
Feeling you there?
Yeah, you got
There
me.
you go. You cut out there
Okay.
for a second. Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot of time in the car, just driving back and forth to places. Um, it's not overly expensive, but it's not cheap. And I don't make a bunch of money, and a bunch of it goes to wrestling.
Hmm.
And here again, it's just depending on how deep you want to go with that. Um, but if you find the right places and the right people, it's very worth it. Like I don't even think twice about driving to Chattanooga or driving up to Dreamwave. Just like, oh, they're running on this date. Yeah, I'm going. Of course, I'm going. And there's definitely more positives than negatives, but I think it's very dependent on the places you're going and the people you're around.
Yeah.
Would I recommend it? 100%. But you could be stuck in a car, sitting in construction traffic. Making your drive even longer. You probably will get stuck sitting by somebody not wearing deodorant at more
Hmm.
than one show you go to.
There, it's true.
There's
Facts.
not. It's not always sunshine and roses, but it's definitely worth it.
It's awesome. Last thing before we go, you and I have one other passion as well. Aside, we don't just care about wrestling; we also care about football.
Yeah,
um, I'm having a rough year so far. How about you, buddy?
week one was great.
Yeah.
uh,
Your affiliation.
yeah, Ohio State Buckeyes,
Hmm.
the Ohio State
Hmm.
Buckeyes. Week one we played Akron, so no sweat. But Oregon barely beat Idaho. Michigan barely beat Fresno State. So for us to go out and beat Akron like we should beat them, it's a good start to the season.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm a Florida Gator fan. That's really all we're gonna say about that.
Yeah,
My coach is gonna be unemployed by Halloween, I think.
yeah. At least Florida State sucks too.
Oh, see, I said this earlier. You know, uh, spite at my age is so much more delicious than victory.
Yeah.
Because we happen to win a couple national championships. I've had that experience, and now I just want the downfall of my enemies. So
Hmm.
Florida State being terrible is just, mwah, oh, so beautiful. It's just so
Yeah.
great, man. Them crap in the bed is just the perfect. Yeah, it's wonderful. If we're gonna suck, I want the people I don't like to suck too.
Yeah. Yeah. We've lost to Michigan 3 or 4 years in a row,
Hmm.
and they won the national title last year.
Yeah,
So it's any win we get right now, it's a good one.
yeah, I get
Yeah.
it. Well, Dylan, if anyone wants to, you're a good follow on the Twitter machine. What is your tweeting handle? Some people do want to follow you and learn about this thing of ours, as John says.
Twitter is at D Hager J15. That's DHAGER J15. Some people say I'm a good follow. Some people say I tweet way too much.
Can't
Follow
relate.
me and find out.
Can't relate. This is a pleasure, seriously, and
Well, thank
I
you.
just I said when I started the podcast that I want to have people on that I like and respect, and we'll have a good conversation with, and um, we'll just vibe with, and you and I have vibed for years, and you're a good guy and a good follow, and just easy to talk to and great conversation, and I'm just really glad we're friends.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me on. Thanks for showing me where the good pepperoni cheese sticks are at in Chattanooga. And yeah, appreciate you.
All right, buddy. We'll be back in a couple of weeks.